The sun bled gold across the canyon walls, turning the mesquite into black lace against the fire of dusk. Down in a hidden fold of the valley, where the creek sang over polished stones and cottonwoods whispered secrets older than the rancher's granddaddy, a girl stepped out of time. Her name was Tahoma, though the white men who traded at the fort called her Tommy, because they couldn't wrap their tongues around the Apache syllables. She was 17, tall as a young saguaro, with eyes the color of storm clouds before rain. The valley was her sanctuary, a place her grandmother had shown her when she was small enough to ride in a cradleboard. Here the world forgets its cruelty, the old woman had said. Here you can be only yourself. Tonight, Tahoma needed that forgetting more than ever. She had spent the morning burying her little brother. The fever had come sudden as a hawk's stoop, 3 days of burning skin, of her mother's songs cracking into silence, of the medicine man shaking his gourd until the rattles sounded like bones. By the time the trader's wagon rattled past the wickiup with its load of canned peaches and lies about a doctor in Tucson, the boy's spirit had already slipped away to the land of grandmothers. So Tahoma walked. She walked until the camp's smoke was a memory and the valley opened its arms. She carried a bundle wrapped in her mother's shawl, a dress of doeskin, beaded with turquoise and the tiny white shells her brother used to collect. It was the dress she would have worn at her sunrise ceremony, the one the women had been stitching for a year. Now it felt too bright, too alive for a world missing a 7-year-old's laugh. She knelt by the creek, letting the water numb her fingers. The current tugged at the hem of her everyday calico, the one patched so many times it looked like a quilt. She wanted to wash the death smell from her skin, to trade sorrow for the weightlessness of water. With a breath that trembled like a moth, she loosened the thongs at her shoulders and let the calico fall. Naked, she was a poem the desert had written in copper and shadow. Her hair, black as crow wings, spilled to her waist. She stepped into the creek. The shock of cold stole her breath, then gave it back cleaner. She lifted the doeskin dress from the shawl, but paused. Not yet. First, she would let the valley see her as she was, grieving, furious, unbroken. High on the ridge, a horse snorted. Tahoma froze. The sound was wrong, too heavy for deer, too deliberate for coyote. She sank lower, water lapping at her collarbones, and turned her gaze upward. A man sat astride a paint gelding, hat pushed back, one hand resting easy on his thigh. Sunlight glinted off the badge pinned to his vest. No, not a badge. A brand inspector's medallion. Rancher. White. Trouble. He hadn't seen her yet, his eyes tracked something lower, where the creek bent around a stand of willows. But any second the horse would shift, the man would look down, and the valley's secret would shatter. Tahoma's heart hammered against her ribs. Apache girls did not let strange men see them undressed. The shame would follow her like smoke, cling to her family, invite the soldiers who were always looking for excuses. She eased toward the bank, fingers searching for the calico. The dress snagged on a root. The small sound carried. The rancher's head snapped around. Their eyes met across 30 yards of twilight and terror. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then the man did something Tahoma would never forget. He looked away. Not a sly glance, not a leer, he turned his face to the ridge as if the most important thing in creation was the flight of a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. He nudged the paint with his knees, guiding the horse sideways until a screen of mesquite stood between them. Only then did he speak, voice low and steady, pitched to carry no farther than the creek. "Evening, miss. Didn't mean to startle you. Creek's public water, but I'll ride the long way round. Take your time." Tahoma's lungs burned. She snatched the calico, water streaming from her skin, and pulled it over her head. The fabric clung, cold and clumsy. She fumbled with the doeskin dress, hugging it to her chest like armor. The rancher waited. She could see the curve of his shoulder through the leaves, the patient set of his spine. He hummed, an old trail song, the kind her father used to whistle when shoeing horses. The tune floated down, gentle as cottonwood fluff. When she was dressed, boots laced, hair twisted into a knot, Tahoma stepped into the open. The valley felt different now, as if the creek had washed the sharp edges off the day. "You can look," she called. Her voice cracked, but it carried. The rancher turned. Up close, he was younger than she'd thought, maybe 30, with sun creases around eyes the color of winter sky. A scar cut through his left eyebrow, pale against the tan. His hat came off in one hand, revealing hair the shade of cedar bark. "Name's Caleb McKettrick," he said. "I brand for the Lazy M, but I'm off duty tonight." He kept both hands visible, reins looped loose. "You all right?" The question undid her. No one had asked since the burial. Her people offered tea, silence, the comfort of shared grief. White men offered blankets and smallpox. This man offered, what? "I buried my brother this morning," she said. The words tasted like iron. Caleb's face changed, not pity, which she would have hated, but a stillness that felt like respect. He nodded once. "I'm sorry for your loss." Silence pooled between them, thick as creek mud. Then he reached into his saddlebag and drew out a small tin. "Coffee. Strong enough to wake the dead, but it don't bring them back. Still. Warms the belly." He set the tin on a flat rock, backed his horse 3 steps, and waited. Tahoma studied him. Apache etiquette said accept a gift and you owed a debt. White etiquette said the same, only louder. But the valley had rules older than either. She crossed the space, picked up the tin. The metal was warm from his hand. "Thank you," she said. He touched the brim of his hat. "Valley's big enough for both our sorrows, I reckon." He started to turn the paint, but Tahoma's voice stopped him. "Mr. McKettrick." "Caleb. Why did you look away?" He considered. "My mama raised me to believe a man's eyes belong to him until he loans them out. Didn't figure you'd lent yours." A laugh escaped her, small, surprised, real. The sound startled a quail from the reeds. Caleb smiled, crooked and tired. "Safe travels, miss." He rode off along the ridge, the paint's hooves kicking up sparks of sunset. Tahoma watched until he was a silhouette against the sky, then opened the tin. The coffee smelled of pinyon and grief. She drank it black, standing in the creek until the stars came out like apologies. That should have been the end. But the valley had other plans. 2 weeks later, the Lazy M's prize bull broke through a fence and wandered into Apache pasture. The rancher who found him, Old Man Hargrove, Caleb's boss, wasn't the forgiving type. He rode to the agency with a shotgun across his saddle and a list of grievances longer than the Gila River. The agent, a drunk with a ledger full of lies, promised restitution. Apache ponies for a white man's bull. The council argued until voices cracked. Tahoma's father, a quiet man who spoke with his hands, offered 2 of his best maras. Hargrove spat. "I'll take the girl who was bathing in my creek. Heard she's got spirit." The words rippled through the camp like poison. Tahoma felt every eye. Her mother's face went gray. That night, she slipped away again, this time with a knife and a plan that tasted like ash. She would cut the bull's throat under cover of darkness, leave the carcass for the buzzards. Better a dead animal than a living shame. She found the bull in a box canyon, moonlit and monstrous. The knife trembled in her hand. Hoofbeats. She melted into shadow as Caleb McKettrick rode up, leading a pack mule loaded with salt blocks. He dismounted, spoke soft to the bull, looped a rope around its neck. The animal followed like a dog. Tahoma stepped out, knife gleaming. "He's not yours to take." Caleb's eyes flicked to the blade, then to her face. "He's not yours to kill, either. He'll cost my people everything. Your people cost themselves when they let Hargrove set the price." He tied the bull to the mule. But I reckon two wrongs don't make a right. What are you doing? The bullet had torn through Caleb's side like a promise broken. Tahoma felt the warmth of his blood soak her palms, smelled the copper tang that meant endings. Around them, the dry wash lay silent except for the wind worrying through sagebrush. Hargrove's men had vanished, cowards when the tide turned. "Stay with me," she whispered in Apache, then English, then a jumble of both. Caleb's eyes fluttered. "Tell, my sister. I finally did something worth writing home about." His laugh came out a cough. Hoofbeats thundered, her father, the medicine man, half the camp riding hard. They lifted Caleb onto a travois woven from willow and saddle blankets. Tahoma ran alongside, one hand on his cheek, counting heartbeats like rosary beads. Back at the wickiup, the women boiled yarrow and stitched with sinew. The men stood guard, rifles gleaming. Caleb drifted in fever dreams, calling for a woman named Ruth and a dog named Blue. Tahoma sat beside him, changing poultices, singing the songs her grandmother taught her for bullet wounds and broken spirits. On the third night, the fever broke. Caleb opened his eyes to find Tahoma asleep against the wall, her head on her knees, the doeskin dress folded neatly beside her like a flag of truce. He tried to sit up. Pain lanced through him, but he managed a crooked grin. "Reckon I owe you that coffee now." She woke instantly. "You owe me a lifetime of not dying." They talked until dawn. He told her about Texas dust devils and his mother's pecan pie. She told him about her brother's obsession with shiny rocks and how the stars looked different from the valley floor. When the sun rose, it painted them both gold. Hargrove wasn't finished. He filed claims, bribed officials, spread rumors that the Apache had shot first. Soldiers came, blue coats, hard eyes, the smell of authority and whiskey. They demanded that instigator be handed over. Tahoma's father gathered the council. "We give them the girl, or we fight." Tahoma stood. "I will go." Silence fell like a blade. Caleb, still weak, pushed through the door flap. "Over my dead body." The agent smirked. "That can be arranged." What followed was a dance of words and wills. Caleb produced a letter from the territorial governor, forged, Tahoma later learned, by a clerk who owed him a gambling debt. It declared the Lazy M Bull a gift to the Apache Nation, nullifying Hargrove's claim. The soldiers, outmaneuvered, retreated with threats that sounded like thunder far off. But peace is a fragile colt. Winter came early, snow dusting the mesas. Cattle starved. Apache ponies grew thin. Hargrove's fences crept closer, cutting off water. Children cried from hunger. One night, Tahoma found Caleb at the creek, staring at the ice. "I can't fix this," he said. "I'm one man." "You're not," she replied. "You're the man who looked away." She had a plan. They rode to Tucson under cover of storm, Tahoma in Caleb's coat, he in her father's spare breechcloth to confuse trackers. In the city, they found allies, a newspaper editor who hated Hargrove, a judge with a conscience, widows who'd lost sons to range wars. Tahoma spoke in the courthouse, her voice steady as stone. She told of the bull, the bullet, the children with hollow cheeks. Caleb stood beside her, scar-livid in the gaslight. The judge ruled, shared water rights, open range, Hargrove fined for damages. The headlines screamed, "Apache Girl Saves the West." But victory tasted like ashes when they returned. Hargrove, drunk on defeat and mescal, waited with a rifle. He shot Caleb in the back as the rancher dismounted to open a gate. This time, the bullet found his heart. Tahoma screamed, a sound that shattered the valley's peace forever. She caught Caleb as he fell, his blood hot on her hands again. His last words were soft. "Tell Ruth, the pie was worth it." They buried him under the cottonwoods where he'd first seen her. Tahoma placed the tin coffee cup in his hands. The Apache mourned with songs that shook the stars. The ranch hands came, hats in hand, tears cutting trails through dust. Spring brought green to the valley, stubborn as hope. Tahoma wore the doeskin dress at sunrise, beads catching light like tears. She stood where Caleb fell and made a vow. She founded a school, first in a brush arbor, then a stone building paid for by cattle drives she organized with Hargrove's former hands. Apache children learned English beside white ones. They read law books and star charts, planted corn and branded calves. The creek ran free. Years passed. Tahoma grew into a woman whose name opened doors and silenced rooms. She married a teacher from the school, a quiet man with kind hands. They had a daughter with Caleb's winter sky eyes. On the anniversary of his death, Tahoma rode to the grave. She brought coffee, strong, black, in the same tin. She poured it on the earth. You looked away, she whispered. And taught a whole valley to see. The wind carried her words to the ridge where a new generation of riders, Apache, white, Mexican, stood guard over shared water, shared sky. The valley's secret was no longer a girl changing her dress. It was the moment a stranger chose kindness over conquest, and a girl chose courage over fear. And every sunrise, the cottonwoods whispered it still.